Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Media Matters for Anfield Index. A quiet weekend, you could say. Not much going on, just a bit of a documentary and a few fights, a few cup exits, but the Red still remain 13 points clear at the top of the league. Here to join me to look ahead to the coming week, the stories off the field, the things that might be interesting on the field as well, is the renowned and the respected David Lynch. I mean, David, a nice quiet weekend, a bit different than normal.
Yeah, it was nice. I met my family for once. That was quite nice. They turned into strangers recently with all the games and everything. So that's been really nice to have a break from it and kind of sit back and watch everybody else get stuck in. And I know, you'd love Liverpool to go on a run in the FA Cup and be in with a shout of winning it. But it's pretty low down the priority list at the moment for Liverpool. And, having a weekend off like that, it's nice to just relish that from time to time because it doesn't happen very often.
As well, I don't know about you, I was thinking about it. I was watching because there were some interesting-ish games on Sunday. There was the bit they both went to extra time, and there's probably a bit of me just thinking, I don't know if it's the same for you, thank God we weren't putting those extra minutes in the legs at the moment.
Yeah, exactly, because it would have been Man City away as well, wouldn't it? So that would have just been tough because could he have named a fully rotated 11 for that one? And even if you do, you probably put in the big hitters on the bench to bring them on in the last half hour. So that's another 30 minutes in their legs or whatever. So, it's something they have to focus on in training. I mean, doing the planning for it, the analysis, all that kind of work. There's a lot goes into these games. So to have avoided that is great. And to be able to give the players a little bit of time off in a period where after it's been so busy and obviously got some key games, or particularly a couple of key games coming up at the moment, then it's fallen really nicely in the end. And I as much as he kind of would have wanted to win this trophy, I'm sure Arne Slot doesn't have too many huge regrets about the FA Cup because, like I said, a little bit of a weekend off and some rest for the players has probably done them a world of good.
Yeah, totally. As much as people want to win every trophy possible, maybe there's just that little bit where we look back and think maybe this wasn't the worst time to exit this competition. But other things that have been dominating the news for Liverpool or that people have been talking about is the Jurgen Klopp documentary, Doubters to Believers. So just in case anyone has been living under a rock and not seen anything around it, let's just play a little snippet from Jurgen Klopp's very last chat post-match to the players.
Everybody what I would play, it's absolutely ridiculous. I can't wait watching you developing maybe the next steps, becoming third. I don't even know yet who became champion. Huh? No, the only one to stop that career, that's it. And you can do that again. I said it this morning. There might be some people who say, that's not enough. I tell you, they don't have a clue about football. So, we have done that in moments, yes. Of course, that's always possible. But did we do better than you can usually expect? Oh, yes. Because it takes longer to become a top team again. And you did that like this. And that's my expectation get. And then we couldn't keep the pace. That's the problem a little bit. And besides that, becoming third in the first season with Liverpool 2.0.
Well, the first season of Liverpool 2.0 was a start. It went boom, as he says. The second season promises to herald a lot. And I was going to ask you, David, because you are a star. I don't know if they've given you your royalty check yet. Have you actually watched any of this so far?
No, I've not actually. I've not heard many great things about it, if I'm honest, in terms of there's not loads of kind of fresh insights in there. So it's pretty low down the list, really. And I'm not sure my wife's going to want to sit down and watch it, to be honest, apart from just the point of me pointing at the screen when I come on or whatever. But it's. But I've seen little clips like that, and do you know what? That clip actually is quite fascinating, I think, in terms of quite clearly how Jurgen saw that this team would take the next steps and that this was kind of the first step. And obviously third place, he wanted to finish higher, but he knew there was more to come from this team and obviously thought that he would challenge for the title this season. And, obviously it's the way it's gone under a new manager is better than anyone expected, but he clearly knew he was leaving really good foundations there. So I think that's a really interesting clip, actually.
Yeah, there is mixed reviews from a lot of people. Harvey Elliott's dad, who we'll talk about the player specifically later, gets a lot of criticism for different quarters as well. But people probably, it's a Marmite one, isn't it? They'll love or they'll hate this documentary. We'll see if anything else breaks from it, but it's hard to say. I mean, the other things that I want to talk about off the field, open trading this week, so that'll be tomorrow. Will you be up at, is it the AXA or Anfield for this one?
Yeah, at the AXA for it, yeah. So planning to go down just to have a look, see if there's any kind of new injuries or anyone's back or whatever. So that'll be interesting, and obviously just to get back into the swing of things after a little weekend off. So yeah, that's kickstart back into another absolutely massive game.
Just thinking, I mean, hopefully, touch wood, there's no one else added to the list, but the list is pretty small. Joe Gomez, we know, not till later in the season after his operation on his hamstring. Any hopes we might see Connor Bradley maybe in this one, or is it a bit too soon, do you think?
Yeah, I'd be really surprised, to be honest, if we did see Connor. I think with what Slot said at his last press conference, which was kind of a few weeks yet. Obviously, I think that's going to be a little while yet. It sounds like a pull of a muscle or something like that. So I think they're going to take the time with him as well this time, because obviously it's a kind of, he's had a couple of muscle issues back to back, and they want to be really careful with those things. So I don't think we'll be seeing him for a little while, unfortunately, but hopefully it will just be those two out. And if that's the case, then Liverpool is still looking in pretty good shape.
Yeah, fingers crossed. It would be good to get another cover right back at least, because it just seems Trent and then Quansah is the deputy a little bit at the moment. So another, just for numbers, will be massively appreciated. But we've got to turn to this one. I mean, this is the big story this recent week off the field. I know you've talked about it on YouTube. You've looked at them as well. These figures, Liverpool's headline loss, 57 million before tax. And there's been, as normal, a lot of poring over them, a lot of analysis. What have you made when you've kind of done a deep dive into the figures so far?
Yeah, I think it's kind of as was expected, really, that they were probably going to have a significant loss off the back of not being in the Champions League. I mean, that is, absolutely still crucial to the model that Liverpool are running at the moment, which is that FSG, basically every bit of money that comes in, they want to put it back into the team. So they effectively are trying to run at break even. But then if you have a setback like not being in the Champions League, then running at break even becomes extremely difficult, because there's a 50 odd million, but probably more than that, really, hole in your accounts for the broadcasting money there. But I think what it shows is we've seen real kind of growth in commercial off the back of kind of the new sponsorships that they're adding. Yeah. That area of the club is just continuing to go from strength to strength. And that was one of the main aims, really, when FSG came in, was to make more of the fact that Liverpool is a global brand and should be making more money, should be rivaling Manchester United for these sorts of things. So they have really taken huge steps forward. So that's, again, another growth there. And then obviously match day revenue going up as well is massive. And again, that is down to the expansion of the Anfield Road end, which is now come online and is starting to make money. So that's a real big boost to the coffers. So what you kind of see is that, when they go back into the Champions League, which is obviously this set of accounts coming up this season, they'll definitely qualify for next seasons as well. And we hope for the next couple after that, is that these commercial and match day boosts will then mix in with that. And then the bottom line and the kind of, what the overall turnover is going to be, is going to look extremely healthy, and it's going to be on an upward trajectory, which is, which is the aim, because I still think Liverpool will, I don't think that means that Liverpool are going to be delving into making profits or anything like that. Like I say, that's not the aim. The aim is to kind of break even, really. But obviously, if you have greater match day revenue, greater commercial revenue, and then your broadcasting goes up as well, altogether, there's just more money available to spend on players, to spend on salaries and those sorts of things. So I think it's, obviously it's bad news that they suffered some short-term pain there with dropping out the Champions League. But I think the long-term picture looks really, really healthy for Liverpool. But it has been generally anyway.
Yeah, Helio saying there that the deficit of 57 million in the comments was pretty much unexpected. But I think as we talked about it there, like the Champions League coming back online, that will be a factor. We also, you forget at the start of last season, they had issues with the roof and the stadium, didn't they? So the Annie Road wasn't open till later on. So that will come into the accounts as well. So is it almost expecting for you that with a season in the Champions League, how well we've done, fingers crossed, league title money, etc., that'll probably correct itself for the next set of accounts, so to speak.
Yeah, and another thing to factor in there as well is that some of those gains that have been made in commercial and match day have been swallowed up by admin costs. So it's costing a lot more. I mean, anybody who runs a household will know that it costs more money these days to run that. So to be running a football club with its office space, with Anfield, what it costs to run on match days, everything, wages and everything are kind of going upwards. So that has eaten up a lot of the benefits, which is why you come in with that big loss. But I think the growth is outstripping that, kind of, generally speaking. So I think that the growth in commercial and match day is kind of outstripping those growth in admin costs. I still think they will go up again next season. But when you factor in that Champions League football is going to come back, I think Liverpool are going to be kind of hitting a nice spot, really, in terms of, again, like I say, I don't think they're not bothered about the small losses or whatever. It's not kind of run like that. The idea is to kind of get in and around break even. So you think the year before was a 9 million loss. That's probably in the realms of kind of acceptability for how they're going to run it. So I wouldn't focus too much on that kind of that 57 million deficit. I just think when you see them, like I say, match day going up, commercial going up, and then you throw the Champions League on top of that, yes, with a little bit of growth in admin costs, but they should kind of even each other out. And I still think there'll be a lot more available cash there for Liverpool. But I mean, having available cash for transfers and wages has not been an issue for Liverpool in recent years. So I guess it doesn't have a huge impact in that sense, but the more money you can get in, the more money you can pay for players. So it's always a good thing, I think.
Yeah, Rajavi saying there's a good point to that. We spent £150 million last summer rebuilding that midfield as well. And the only thing, it's not on the screen there, and you understand why. There's been a mixed reaction to this. In the accounts, it was seen that Jurgen Klopp and his staff had received a £9.6 million settlement, I think it was phrased. Some people describe it as a payoff. I've seen a few say, if Jurgen's resigned, why is he getting that type of money? And I kind of get a point, but then I also think the staff have the impacts of his decision as well. What's your take on that settlement, if we call it that, for Jurgen Klopp and his staff?
Yeah, it's a strange one. I can't say I'm an expert in these sort of contractual issues, and people I've spoke to about it couldn't really give me a kind of satisfactory explanation around that. I guess a lot of the payoffs will be for staff who they kind of didn't decide they were going, so they would get paid off, as you allude to there. But obviously, I guess a big chunk of it will be payments to Jurgen, and what it was put to me was it's just what he's kind of contractually due. But I personally don't understand it, really. I mean, it's the comment there coming in that he deserves every penny, which is probably fair enough. And I think a lot of fans would see it as that. But it's a little bit of a strange one for someone who kind of resigned to get a payoff or severance pay of any sort. Does seem strange, but we're just told that is kind of what he was owed or whatever. So yeah, a bit of an unusual one. But like I say, I'm not an expert in these football contracts and exactly how these kind of things work, and whether there was a break clause of some sort that allowed him to get that payoff regardless. I'm not sure, but it's it was a little bit of a strange one, I'd say, because it's a big chunk of money, by the way. Because I mean, you add that 10 million back in, it takes a bit off the loss, doesn't it? So just a bit of a strange one, really.
Yeah, it is a bit strange. I do find those who. And I can argue it either way, but for those that say it's fair and I can make the argument it should get every penny, you probably can't moan too much then if you're talking about a loss at the same time, if you're happy to give Jurgen Klopp and his staff 10 million that way. But it is what it is. And you mentioned that word contract. It wouldn't be a pod without talking about it this week. And it's interesting because we've talked about different journalists. Lewis Steele, we've mentioned from the Daily Mail. We've mentioned Sam Wallace. David Ornstein wrote about it in the last week or so, and he almost did that. I called it a briefing to you last week in terms of Salah, Van Dijk expected to say, Trent less positive in this regard. I mean, this does seem to be the consistent noise, and now David Ornstein saying it. You can understand why fans are going to be, hold on, this is the briefing. If this doesn't happen, what is going on?
Yeah, Liverpool aren't saying that, so I would kind of push back on the idea it's a briefing, because nobody at Liverpool, as far as I'm aware, is saying that there's saying that around Trent. I think again, and this is not to kind of shoot down David Ornstein. I would be absolutely stupid to do that, because he's phenomenal and his contacts are great. But obviously, he's written it in a very similar way, I thought, to Sam Wallace, and we spoke about it in terms of kind of, it's just, this is kind of the vibe. And I get, you can see that on social media, the way people talking about it, it's the vibe that Trent might be going. But for me, at the moment, it's still people kind of filling in gaps, because Salah spoke about it, Van Dijk has spoken about it, they've said how much they want to stay. Liverpool clearly want them to stay. So we can, can get there in terms of thinking that those two will eventually be signed up and that will be sorted. But when it comes to Trent, I just think a lot of the talk about it is kind of, we're filling in the gaps because he hasn't said anything about it, and therefore his silence is being taken as something. And maybe that will be right, by the way. Maybe we're not reading too much into it by saying that Trent is, we get that feeling that he's going to go because he's not talking about it. This could actually be the case, but it could also be the case that he's just fulfilling what he said he would do, which is to not play it out in public, and he actually does want to sign, and it's going to happen. But it's still ongoing at the moment, and we just, I don't want to kind of get into kind of filling in the gaps with it, is what I'm saying. And I think that there's a little bit of that going on, and it could be, the vibe is at the moment that Trent's going to go, but then he stays anyway, and why did we buy into that, is kind of what I'm saying. So I'm not so sure there's anything concrete in this one, and as far as I'm aware at the moment, talks with all three are ongoing. And there's a hope that all three will stay. So that is still kind of the position. And I defer to that as something a little bit more concrete than, because Trent isn't speaking, we have to read something into it.
Yeah, I suppose whilst there's silence, everyone will look to fill it, won't they? And everyone will be looking for, is there an angle? Is there anything to develop? I think because we're all just desperate for news and for all three to stay, we're hoping to hear something. But it does just seem, does there not a bit of you that seems, we're in March, there's not long till the end of the season. I know it's all about trophies and that quite rightly, but it does seem quite mad that three of the best players in the world are at this club and potentially leaving on a free, and there's no real noise or anything concrete developing.
Yeah, but it's just noise, isn't it? Like, there's like reports that come out from time to time where someone claims it's close or whatever, and everybody gets excited and everyone's like, it feels like it's going in the right direction. But it's all just noise. So, I still defer to what Virgil says to us regularly, which is that he is not that fussed about it at the moment. He's not, worried in any way. And he clearly thinks it's going to get done. And I get a similar vibe from Salah now with the way he's kind of just gone quiet about it. I think they both think it's going to get done. So, and like I say, we can't really read into Trent because we're not hearing anything. But they are very relaxed about it. So if that's the case, then they think this is being done in a normal, respectful way, that they're happy with the progress that's being made. So we've just got to kind of accept that that's how it is. I mean, ideally it would be wrapped up by now, and that worry will be taken away from fans. But, if the players aren't worried, then we probably shouldn't be either.
Yeah, we've got no choice but to wait and see what happens with this one. And another contract came onto the docket. This was a story that quite a few had yesterday in regards to Arne Slot, that Arne Slot does have 2 years left to go in the summer, and it's quite a good salary. Well, say good salary, huge salaries on in terms of world terms, but below a lot of elite managers, but the bonuses could take him up. Do you think this will be a priority for Richard Hughes as well? 2 years left to go in the summer, proved himself without doubt. We need to get Arne Slot extended.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think, it'd just be kind of, Liverpool have, generally speaking, been quite good at that. I mean, obviously with prime age players, as soon as they sort of perform well, they try and get you see it with kind of academy kids as well. The likes of Conor Bradley and Harvey Elliott is signing incremental deals every other year, seemingly, when they start to break through. It's just to recognise the development and reward them. So I see no different why they would take a different approach with the manager, and they don't want to leave themselves in a contractual situation whereby if anybody else is looking for a manager, they might look to him. He's doing an absolutely fantastic job. So I'm pretty sure they'll see that as a bit of a priority this summer in terms of getting it sorted and getting him extended and rewarding what he's done, which at the moment looks like it's going to be a Premier League title at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we don't get it done, as you said, there could well be envious glances from other clubs. So fingers crossed something gets sorted on that as well. And these questions, quite a few of them I've got for you, have come in from sort of Discord, from pro members as well. So questions around sort of contracts, we talked about, but possible squad leavers or possible departures. This name is one that keeps coming up. We have talked about Harvey Elliott a lot, and I know you're a fan of the player. I know you'd said before that it's not been the greatest of seasons for different reasons for him, and he may wait to see what happens or how it bodes next summer. I mean, he was an unused sub again the other night, wasn't he, against Newcastle? Are you still leaning towards that you think he will, just because of the fact he is such a staunch Liverpool fan?
Do you know what? I'll be honest. I feel like my kind of position on this is changing a little bit the further into the season we go, because I did expect that he would get more chances. I mean, I spoke to someone around January about this, and he kind of said, look, he's got a role to play in the second half of the season. He's frustrated because he's been injured, but, we'll see what happens. And the hope is that he'll play more. And what's happened really is he's kind of playing less and less. It's, it's remarkable, really, the extent to which he's not been used. And it feels kind of pointed that Slot won't turn to him from the bench in moments where he might need him. And just hasn't been giving him the minutes at all. And I think, as much as he is a Liverpool fan, and that will kind of, it'll play a role in his thinking around what happens this summer. It's no good being a Liverpool fan sat on the bench and just watching the games. You might as well be in the stands with the season ticket at the moment, with the complete lack of minutes he's getting. So I think it's prime, and it's putting him in a position where he's got a big decision to make this summer. Because I don't think the manager would be too heartbroken if he were to leave, judging by the lack of use. And I think that's a real shame, because I think there's, I think you saw in pre-season he could work in this system and that he would be good under this manager, but it just hasn't kind of worked for him yet, unfortunately. And the manager just doesn't seem to fancy him. So that is a real shame. And I think if Liverpool got a decent bid in this summer, they would be minded to accept it, and then it would be up to the player. And hard to kind of predict how he would approach that. And a real shame that it's kind of come to this, but I think there's something brewing there in terms of potential exit for him.
Yeah, it's like you say, just I think 30 odd minutes across the last 8 Premier League games, and only 76 minutes in the Premier League all season. I know punctuated with an injury. The other one that a few Discord viewers have actually asked this morning as well, Endo seems to be a little bit more trusted, doesn't he, in that regard? And he's actually overtaken now Harvey Elliott in terms of minutes. We said before, maybe Arne Slot does just regret out of any games not bringing him on to see how Everton or play his part that way. There does seem to be increased trust for Endo. Do you think there could be an increased chance of a future at Anfield, or is this more just still a parting of ways, you think, in the summer?
Again, I think, I don't think Liverpool will be against kind of keeping him around. Obviously, he would have a couple of years left on his contract. He won't be on insane wages by any means, and he's a great guy to have around and a very useful squad player. But, there's real potential, isn't there, to add a midfielder that the manager fully trusts. And if they do that in the summer, again, you're looking at him and thinking, where are your minutes going to come from? Where are you going to, how are you going to get in the team at all? So it's really, really hard to see how he would move past this and be a bigger part of this squad. So it's all about kind of asking the player, what do you want to do there? And I just wonder, after 2 years at Liverpool, hopefully a couple of winners' medals as well there, more to add to the League Cup winners he's got already, then, he might just think, okay, maybe now is my time to move on and go and play elsewhere. So again, I think that one, very similar to Harvey Elliott, is that it's going to be kind of more of a decision for the player to make than anything. But if you see in that few minutes and you are just seen as a closer, do you really want to stick around?
Yeah, it is a big decision for him to make. As Red Armchair Supporter says there, he is, yes, ideal for seeing games, but longer term, there's a question mark there. John are also saying we need better than Endo. You can't have Grav playing this many games. We need a quality midfielder signed. Yeah, there is big question marks around those two. And the other one that's come up from quite a few, a position that we've probably, as we've talked about, never had a better collection of keepers at the club that we can recollect. It's absolutely brilliant, even in terms of the third choice, from Alisson to Queeve to Yaros now. The thing is, Marmadashvili, as we know, is set to come in this summer, and you'll have seen all the reports this morning that he is expected to come in, and he's not here to sit on the bench to go straight in. I suppose Queeve is fully expected. I know you've said that before to move on. Is there any suspicions or anything you're thinking around Alisson as well? Because you can't see Alisson being displaced if he stays, but with Marmadashvili coming, have you got any question marks around that at all and Alisson's future?
Yeah, I think it's a live issue at the moment. Yeah, I think there's a real possibility Alisson does move on. I mean, there was talk around it kind of coming into last summer, and then the players' camp kind of shot that down pretty early eventually, and kind of said that no, he's going to stay for this season at least. But there was potential then to kind of let's see what happens next summer, and again the Saudi interest there in him, some top European clubs I'm sure would be interested, but I think for him, that's the one that if he were to leave Liverpool, he maybe would go to Saudi and kind of make that money. So that's going to be an interesting one if that's back on the table. And again, I don't think Liverpool are going to be kicking him out the door. I think their ideal situation is maybe to go into next season with Alisson and Marmadashvili 1 and 2, and then sort of have that competition ongoing. And then the season after that, maybe Marmadashvili becomes first choice. I think that would be kind of the dream scenario. But it's all kind of on what does Alisson want, and if he kind of pushes for that move away, then they've kind of got it boxed, then haven't they? Because they've got a situation whereby Marmadashvili, okay, you can come in, you can be our first choice goalkeeper. Maybe Yaros sticks around for another season as the number 2 there, and you're pretty well set. So I think all those kind of outcomes are live at the moment. It'd be very, very difficult to predict exactly what's going to happen, but I think you couldn't rule out that Alisson would leave this summer. I think that's it's definitely a possibility. But there's a few things that have got to go into that.
Yeah, it does probably a good way to phrase it as you did, a live issue. But either way, you would expect Liverpool to still be very well stocked in terms of goalkeepers moving into the new season. So that is another one to watch for this summer. In terms of incomings, we probably both got a bit of a disappointment, didn't we, on Saturday, that Matthias Cunha, a player that we've talked about, 15 goals. He scores an absolute peach in this one as well. A player with a release clause. We've said that Liverpool like him as well. Has he just killed his potential move with what happened for that red card?
Yeah, I think if Liverpool were looking, and I hadn't had any indication he was, I just think we were talking, weren't we, about kind of, I liked the profile an awful lot and thought if that's the kind of forward Liverpool were going for, he would be a great fit. But if they were considering it, I think that would have maybe kiboshed any chances of getting a move to Liverpool, because they're so big, aren't they, on character and kind of mentality and in the players that they sign, and to do that in the same season that you've kind of nicked someone's glasses off the face in a post-match melee, it doesn't look great, does it? It doesn't bode well for him as a character coming in and not causing issues within the squad. So yeah, I think it might have caused him problems in terms of if Liverpool were looking at him, maybe other clubs will think that they can get that under control. But it was a little bit of a moment of madness from him, and he's shown that he's capable of that before. So maybe it will make other clubs think twice, albeit, he's got a 60 million release clause and he's absolutely brilliant. So maybe you take the risk, but it's not the kind of risk that Liverpool tend to take.
Yeah, it does make you wonder, as much as he has been sensational for Wolves, does that put a cross next to his name? A Psycho Pal should be interesting there. If it was Kirkez and Cunha joining, it could be an interesting sort of chat in the summer. And I know we've talked about them, and there's no way of saying for definite, but a few have asked almost this, and I feel like I'm asking it again, but it was mentioned in Discord a lot. Kirkez and Hato, they are two that Liverpool, and they keep getting mentioned again and again and again. You have to put them on the list of possibilities, don't you, for now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very, very hard to say. What's interesting about those, though, in terms of who are these the first choices or whatever? Are these the ones they're going to go for? Is that Kirkez and Hato quite different profiles by all accounts? I mean, again, I don't watch them week in, week out, but I think that's interesting. So, does that give you the possibility of one coming in as centre half cover and the other being the first choice left back? That's kind of an interesting aspect to this, really, that there's interest in both. So we'll kind of have to see on that front. But clearly, I think one thing we do know is that they're going to sign a left back this summer, and I think it is the one position you could get absolutely huge improvement if you did that alone this summer. I think you could get a lot of improvement into the team by doing that. So it's good that that's an area that's being looked at, and that's an area we expect that they're going to strengthen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone wants a new left back in, and it's fully expected for this summer. And this one's probably still live, and there's a link to Adam Wharton, though apparently Liverpool's priorities do lie elsewhere this morning. It was a question that was asked by a few in terms of midfielders. It's been a 6 for the last 2 summers, as you know, and we've talked about this 8,000 times in terms of failed moves, names, etc. With what's happened this season and Gravenberch's emergence, do you think it is still a 6, a Zubimendi type Liverpool are looking for, or could the needle or the profile have changed on that at all?
I think it will have changed. I think the Gravenberch's emergence has kind of changed what they need completely, to be honest. I don't think when they went for Zubimendi, they expected Gravenberch to be this good in this role. I think that's come as a bit of a surprise to everyone, which is, it may sound mad and you'd be like, oh, well, the people who are planning these moves at the club, how did they not know? But football's a bit like that. Things can happen by chance. Someone an academy kid gets the debut and they turn out to be absolutely sensational straight from the off, or like you say, you drop a midfielder into a deeper role and he takes to it like he's prime Ruud Gullit. It's, these kind of things you can't really kind of expect. So I do think it's changed the profile. So I think that, my opinion really is that Liverpool, it would be madness to go and sign a specialist 6 now who is going to spend 90% of the season on the bench, and you also, and people say, well, you need depth. And yes, you do need depth. Absolutely. But I mean, it makes no sense to have a world-class number 6 sat behind Gravenberch, or to suddenly want to bench Gravenberch for most of the season. And there's no way either that both these players, these fictional number 6, like Gravenberch's going to want to share the minutes with him so that they play 25 games out of a 50-game season. It just doesn't really make sense. So for me, the profile Liverpool need really is someone who can do a bit everywhere now. Is someone who can play in that 6 and is capable, but someone who can play a little bit further forward and mix things up in that way. So then there are minutes for them and you can rotate a little bit more in midfield, but you're not just rotating one specific player, you're rotating everyone, and everyone gets a couple more games on the bench throughout the season, but this player gets enough minutes to be happy. So that for me is kind of the profile they should be looking for, and I kind of expect, to be honest.
Yeah, Ronald saying there, still think it'll be a young, aggressive player who can do 6 and 8, which would tally with that as well. At the same time, Jono saying, I want a versatile, athletic midfielder who can play anywhere in midfield and not one specific role. And it is believable, they'll be looking at a player that can cover 6, maybe 8 different positions. It is hard to know. I suppose the only thing that we've talked about as well, I know you mentioned this specifically because you used the word churn last week in terms of it'll probably be natural with who wants to depart. Is it still a case of staunch believer it'll be a 1 in, 1 out type of thing? They're not going to look to do sort of wholesale changes unless there are wholesale exits at the same time.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think, people talk about the squad or whatever. I mean, it's absolutely massive, to be honest. I mean, they've got 2 players in every position of decent quality. So I think it's obvious, isn't it, that you need to move some players on if you're going to make some signings this summer. But I just think there's natural opportunities for that to happen. I mean, we've spoken before that obviously I think left back happens regardless, but I do think that facilitates maybe a Tsimikas exit anyway. I think that's kind of the writings on the wall around that one. But obviously Núñez, we know there's interest there, and he is likely to leave this summer. So again, that opens up an opportunity up top. Joe Gomez will leave to go and play more regularly elsewhere. That very nearly happened already. So again, they're going to need a centre half. So these opportunities to tweak the squad are going to open up naturally. But I mean, it could end up being quite busy on that basis, though, because, say Harvey Elliott does make that decision, he wants to move on and play more football, then all of a sudden you're looking for a midfielder of his ilk as well. So it really could open up into being a busy summer, really, but not through kind of, Arne Slot wanting to take a knife to the squad or anything like that. I think it's more just a case of that there are players who are obvious candidates to leave and they will need replacing.
Yeah, I think there will just be it was well praised that natural churn from that. Players will need replacing. And the only other one that's coming up in the chat panel, a few have mentioned him as well. Stefan Bajcetic, because it was a bit of a disaster on loan at Salzburg, wasn't it? But it looks like from the intimations he's had a decent start at Las Palmas. They even played him at centre-back for a short period as well. Do you think there is a chance he could get minutes, or are you struggling to see it a bit for next season?
Given how ruthless Arne Slot has been with who's in the squad at the moment, I struggle to see it, to be honest. I mean, he made that big call at the start of the summer, didn't he, to get him out and get some minutes into him. And yeah, it didn't go that well at Salzburg, but he played a lot of football, and then he's still playing at Las Palmas. And as you say, by all accounts, doing well. But I'd really be surprised if he came back to Liverpool and was competing for a spot. I think central midfield is clearly an area that there's going to be some tweaking going on this summer, and he's shown such a lack of trust in other options. The idea of him coming back and wanting to finish off this Bajcetic project, I can't really see that happening, to be honest.
Yeah, it kind of does feel with Slot. If you like Shaw, he doesn't. The distinction's quite clear, and if you're not in his fancy, you will see very little to minimal minutes there. We'll see what happens with Bajcetic this summer. But more immediately, funnily enough, there is a few games this week. It's PSG on Wednesday night, and maybe Liverpool's last Saturday 3:00 kickoff against Southampton. Now, if you look at this run-up, David, there's only 4 games in the month of March, but there's 3 in 6 days, isn't there? The 2 PSG and the Southampton. Normally, last year we'd have been talking about rotation. Are we expecting minimal to any with Arne Slot in these 3? Do you think it will just be first team as much as possible as we've seen? Or could there even be a chance to... I mean, it almost feels like if Harvey Elliott's not going to get minutes against Southampton at home, where is he going to get minutes?
Yeah, I mean, but it's hard to expect that there will be rotation because we've seen so little of it from the manager. So, I just can't see a random Harvey Elliott start coming out of nowhere in that Southampton game. I mean, it would be an absolutely perfect opportunity to do it, but he just hasn't done it. And I think, with the way the kind of games land, maybe we'll have kind of one eye on that. With that being the Tuesday after the Saturday, but that's quite a big gap. And also with Southampton, you would like to think Liverpool could kind of get the job done early and start dragging players off. So again, if that does happen, he'll just maybe Harvey will get his minutes there or whatever, or any of the fringe players will. So it's very hard to see any rotation to the starting 11, to be honest. Particularly, I'm sure Dominic Szoboszlai will play all 3 as well. Absolutely no doubts about that. So. It's just not been something that Slot has done, and he's managed to keep the players fit despite that. So I doubt we're going to see any kind of surprise starters in these ones. Maybe a little bit of a tweak in midfield, Jones coming in for one and coming out for the other or whatever. But I think it's going to be as you'd expect for all 3 games, really. Yeah,
it's hard to see any different. And there's a few people staying there. Salah will want records, so he's got no interest in being benched or rested that way either. And we talk about a few final wider things as ever on the pod. A little bit before we get into the final fixtures for Liverpool and coming into March, you probably clocked it as well. The game yesterday, Newcastle, Anthony Gordon looks set to miss the final, doesn't he? I mean, it's being appealed. They can't overturn that, surely.
No, absolutely no chance that they will. I think they've just thrown the appeal in on just out of pure desperation, really, but not a chance it will be overturned. I mean, it's clear as day, and I actually cannot believe that has happened. By the way, I actually think there's some of the kind of detractors of Liverpool this season, opposition fans who talked about Liverpool's luck. They kind of have a point, don't they? I mean, they've just had Newcastle and City back to back without Isak and Haaland, and then Anthony Gordon goes and does that. The most inexplicable moment of madness. I mean, as a player, you must be knowing coming into these games, okay, I've got 3 games here where I need to just not get sent off for violent conduct, and then he did. I actually cannot believe that he did. It's almost like you want to buy into the conspiracy theory that he's a Liverpool fan and he doesn't want to face them at Wembley. It's that's how mental it is that he did that. I just couldn't believe it. And you have to say it's a boost for Liverpool because he's a fantastic player. His pace on that big pitch would have been a real test for Trent down that side. So I mean, they've got good cover in Harvey Barnes. I'm sure will start, and he's not a bad player at all. But I still think Gordon is the better player. So it's unbelievable boost for Liverpool. And just like I said, cannot get my head around what I saw from Anthony Gordon. It was just a moment of absolute madness.
Yeah, and as a few people mentioning here, there's question marks around Isaac, although Eddie Howe suggested it was fatigue more than anything, but not a good period for him to be suffering with injuries and fatigue. So who knows what Newcastle team will face when we go to Wembley. But before we get to Wembley, and maybe afterwards, who knows? You'll have seen the coverage of these, and maybe this is first world problems of being super greedy. Everyone is starting to look at these fixtures and say, when do you think we could win it? Just because of how bad Arsenal have been recently and the games, the run. I mean, when we stack those fixtures as even the next 5, David, they look favourable, don't they? There's Southampton at home, the Derby at home. Yes, people will say it's the Derby. Fulham are a mid-table side, West Ham at home, Leicester are hopeless away. Are you looking at any and thinking, nothing's ever certain, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the big game for it?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of underlines, doesn't it, how big a period this was that Liverpool have just come through. If they were going to throw the league away, they were going to give Arsenal any hope whatsoever, it was going to be in that run, because once they got the other side of it, this fixture list now looks so handy during the run-in. There was Arsenal needed them to lose 3 or 4 of those last few games that they've been through. Even if you completely disregard their injury problems, which I think took it away from them anyway. The reason this run is so winnable is because they've been through a run that didn't look very winnable at all and won out through that. So it's looking like a good run in for Liverpool, a gentle one. And again, that's you start asking the question now, don't you, of kind of when they can win it. And that's interesting on the basis of having this gentle run, being able to wrap the Premier League title up quite nice and early. These are all huge benefits, I think, for a run at the Champions League. So it looks really nice, and I think this upcoming run, they're all games that you'd expect Liverpool to win. I mean, maybe they will slip up somewhere, but it probably won't have any effect anyway. It's probably meaningless. So even if there are some drop points in there, it's no disaster at all. But you think that they will go on a long winning run to finish it off.
Yeah, it even seems crazy. People forget this coming weekend, you'd expect Liverpool to beat Southampton. So Arsenal would kick off away at Old Trafford, 16 points behind Liverpool, you'd suspect. So yeah, with so little games to go, single figures after that, it does sound brilliant. And I suppose the final one, I know you probably thought when you got the agenda, it's got a special question at the end. A few had asked this in the Discord chat. Last day of the season, Crystal Palace. Are we talking quiet celebration in the press room afterwards, or are we hearing Lynch, Steele, Pearce on it in Matthew Street? What are we talking on the final game of the season?
But I'll be honest, I don't think Lewis Steele will be celebrating the Liverpool title win. I don't want to give too much away in terms of who he supports, but it's not Liverpool, I'll say that. But yeah, definitely going to go for a couple of pints after. No doubts about that. Getting the 12th man, I think, round Anfield was a lot of my mates go there, and then plan is to go into town as well, and hopefully see you as well. And I mean, it's so nice, isn't it, to be in that position to be talking about this, because I always think back to that the season when Liverpool did win the league, and it just ended in such kind of tragic circumstances. I know everything around that was so much bigger than football, but football, as Klopp said often, is kind of the most important of the unimportant things, and it was really, really sad that Liverpool supporters didn't get that day in the sun, and everybody who's been going for 30 odd years to kind of see all their old friends and talk about this happening. And that you just kind of dream of that sunny day, don't you, seeing the Liverpool captain lifting the league title on the pitch, and the day as a whole, how great that is. So to be able to know that is coming now, what an absolute joy and a privilege that is to be in this position. So yeah, everyone should soak every bit of joy out of these next few games, and then that Sunday is going to be a big one, and I'm sure I'll be out with James Pearce and the gang for a few beers after as well.
There you go. It should be a monumentous day for all involved. And where will it be won? It's near on impossible to say right now, isn't it? But a lot to focus on this week. PSG, a double header, and Southampton, 3 o'clock on Saturday. We shall see what those bring. All it leaves me to say as ever is David, for the time, the analysis and the insight, and maybe for a pint on Matthew Street one day. It is much appreciated.
No, thank you. And by the way, if you want my prediction for when they're going to win it, I've got one eye on that Tottenham home game. I think that might be the one.
Does seem a popular decision for some people. Let's hope that is the case. But ladies and gents, on Monday the 3rd of March, that was another Media Matters for Anfield Index.